Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's review. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be focusing our efforts on text in this particular tutorial when it comes to Illustrator. So I want to basically show you just some of the tips of the trade, some ways that you can make the process a little bit easier, a couple things to watch out for, and basically how you can manipulate the text however you need to. So let's actually take a look at how you can get started with this. Okay, so first thing I'd like everyone to do is go to the upper right, and you should see our little essentials area. Now, we talked about this in a previous class. However, for today, we're going to be hitting the drop down over here, and instead of using the essentials, we're actually going to be using an area specifically for text called typography. Now, once we click this area, again, essentials, typography, you'll see that the interface changes a little bit. Now, this is kind of a good thing because this particular interface just works a little bit better with the whole idea of working with text. And some of the elements do come up a little bit nicer, and they're going to help us through today's lecture. Now, like before, I'm going to bring out my layers area just so I can work with this a little easier. And just want to keep my properties easy to find. Okay, so when it comes to text, you'll want to make sure that you have at least these different tools available. That would be type, and also area type tool, vertical type tool, vertical type, type on a path tool, and vertical path tool. Now, it might not necessarily be in this order, and if you don't see all your text in here, which might be the case, specifically if you just freshly downloaded this software, you should be able to find all those different tools if you click the three dots and go down your list. Yep, here we go. All the different type of types can be found in this area, and you can just click and drag them like we've seen previously. So let's take a look at some simple text first, and I'll make a couple lines for this. So you can make the text in two ways, at least if you're using the standard type tool. You click here, and if you just give the area a quick little tap, this will basically allow you to keep on typing until the cows come home. And the only time that this is going to go down is if you hit return and then just kind of plug away and such. Now, the alternative way you can do this, and to be honest, a little bit more neater, or more neat, I should say, would be going to the text area, and instead of just giving a quick little tap, you can click and drag this. You'll see a little guide will all of a sudden appear, and this area tends to get filled up with text immediately. So if a person wants to, they could actually add in text this way. Or alternatively, if you want to, you could actually erase the text. This is called placeholder text, by the way. And you could change some of the text elements in the character area that we see over here. And that could actually be quite useful. So just to give an idea of how this could work, I could actually change what's called the set font family, which basically gives you all your different type of fonts. Now, something I want to make sure that's very clear before you do this assignment, or any assignment, is just because a person has a font on one computer doesn't necessarily mean it's on another one. So for example, you're going to see a bunch of different fonts in here immediately, but there's some, if you're using a Mac, that you might not see here, and vice versa. So one of the things that I would want to show everyone here is how you can actually save the original Illustrator file and also another file to make sure that your fonts stay consistent. And we'll do this momentarily. Okay, so anyways. So once I choose my font, you'll also notice, I'll actually put this in Times New Roman because that's a type of font that everyone should have just by default. So let's see, here we go, Times New Roman. The area below this is a little section called Set Font Style. Now what this does is it allows you to choose whatever kind of font kind of extra special elements that you want for this. So for example, Times New Roman has italic, bold, bold italic, but not every font family is going to have the same option. So for example, if I go to, I'm not going to Comic Sans, never Comic Sans. Century. This actually only has an option for regular, so you can't change that one beyond this. Likewise, if I go to Broadway, same thing. So there's some fonts that don't have any extra bells and whistles. Some of them just have the bare minimum. So let's see. Let's see if I go to Calibari. There's a whole bunch of new options in this. So again, if you get more familiar with how text and fonts work, you might want to do some experimentations this way. And of course, anyone who's used Microsoft Word probably recognizes this one. This is your set font size, and you can basically make this bigger or smaller however you need to. So just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to put this at 18. And the next time I make my font, by the way, if you want to make just some placeholders text, which is going to look a lot nicer than what I'm doing here, that's just not cool. Yeah. You can right-click this area, go down your list, and you should see an option here called Fill with Placeholder Text. So again, right-click, Fill with Placeholder Text, and it'll put in some nice instant text for you. So again, one of the purpose of placeholder text, once again, right-click, Insert with Placeholder Text, is so that a person who's most likely the designer or a person who works with the design of the project can basically just add some, as it says, placeholder text to see how the scene would look without it looking like gibberish, or even more gibberish, I should say. But anyways, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete half of this because I think it's going to help us with the next part of the lesson. So if you ever need to actually change the text after the fact, you could just click and drag the general text, and then you could make the text bigger or smaller however you need to. Just be careful. If you go past that little area over here, you're going to see this little plus sign, not the end of the world, but it is something to kind of watch out for. I'm going to keep this at 14 for now. I think that'll be good for what I'm doing. Now, there's a lot of other pertinent information that's going to be coming up when you're working with text. One is basically how you situate your text. Now again, if anyone's worked with Microsoft Word, some of this is going to be a little familiar. One area that is going to be familiar is what's called the set the leading. Now what this does is it basically separates your rows like what you're seeing over here. So if you want them to be spread out more, that's basically how you could do it. If you want them to come in, that's how you could do it too. Now, just for the sake of time, I'm going to be focusing in the areas that's going to be the most pertinent for everyone's information. So one other area that you could use for this is what's called the tracking. This sets out your fonts the way that you see them here. And yeah, I'm just going to use this because it's a little faster. And of course, if you put in a negative, it brings the text a little closer. You put a positive, it sets them a little further apart. I definitely would not recommend making it 200, at least for what we see here, but depending on what you do for your projects, this could be a good thing to know. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show in character for now. We're going to switch on to paragraph. Now by default, it usually has an alignment of left, just because again, this is how we usually would read these areas. But the paragraph area also has an option to align right, although I usually don't see this used. More likely a person is going to be using what's called the align center, which aligns the text perfectly in the center so that this side over here and this side over here are a little bit more even. Might not be 100%, but it's going to be a lot closer to what we saw previously. And again, the align left, the align center, the align right, that's usually the standards. We also have options for what's called justified. Now what this means is it's going to make your text fill out this area as squarely as possible, while at the same time in this case it still aligns to the left. Likewise, the other side aligns more to the right. Now, the justify is, in these two cases, the left and the right, will not actually spread out your text any more than it has to. It's just going to try and make this area as square as possible. Sometimes it has the text kind of go from one area to the other and so on. Now, the justify with the last line, that's going to kind of bring this a little bit more to the center. But again, overall, it is going to try to just make this as square as possible. Now, the last one that I want to show is the one that's probably going to be used the least, but it's still good to know, is what's called the justify all lines. This one does the square thing that we see over here, but it also makes this end and this end spread out as much as possible. Again, depending on what you plan on doing, this could actually be pretty useful, or it's one of those things that could be a little bit strange for a project. Most likely you're going to be using the aligns over here for your work. But still, it's good that you know what these are and such. Okay, so we basically went over paragraphs and everything else like that. We can, once we're here, we can right-click, hit the fill with placeholder text, and then boom, the rest of it basically looks this way. Although that being said, yeah, it looks like the text is a little bit strange. So if I click and drag, starting from top to bottom, or hit Control A, again, Control A is an apple, that'll select anything that's within this text area. That's actually kind of useful for us. And then I could switch everything the way it needs to be. So I can make this Kalabari. I could change the font size to 14. I can make sure that the paragraph all aligns from the left. And it's a little bit more even. Now, if you guys remember, it's usually not a good idea to have, let's see, to have text that might be a little bit on the strange side in terms of inconsistent fonts, unless there's a game plan. Inconsistent way that they're letting or tracking. If it's inconsistent, it's going to start looking strange. So usually it's not the best idea to do that. But that's pretty much it, at least for this part of the text. So this is actually pretty similar to what people have used if they use anything like Microsoft Explorer and that one too, but more any kind of Word document and so on. But let's get into something new and unique. So I'm actually going to make myself a new layer, and I'm going to hide the old stuff. Yep, there we are. So what we're going to get into next is we're going to get into the different shapes. Actually, before we even do that, the vertical type tool, this one we're not going to go over way faster, by the way, basically allows a person to basically click and drag an area, and the text will basically be going from up to down. Also note that if I was to type, it would be going from right to left. And right over here, right click, fill with placeholder text, bam. And again, depending on what the objective of your goal is, this actually could be quite useful. But all the other options are pretty much the same. Things like, the fonts, the letting, the tracking, and any kind of special font sizes and such. So things to kind of keep in mind. Oh, by the way, before I forget, and this is a good enough time to say this is when you're done with your text, my recommendation is select your black arrow, or alternatively, hit, just hit your black arrow. That's the safest way to do it. And if you ever have to get rid of a text little area like this, just select the text you need, hit delete, and it's gone like that. So some basic text elements over here. Now let's get into some potentially new areas. Now what you could do, if you needed to, you could make a little design for yourself. So I'm going to make myself a little heart. Again, I'm just doing this a little bit on the quick side just because of time. There we are. I can make this look a little bit nicer later if I want to, but this is all we need this for right now. Okay, so some of the other options, I'm actually going to duplicate this, Command-C, and if you hit Edit, Paste in place. I'd recommend going to Edit, Paste in place. It's just going to be a little easier for people on Mac and PC. But if you choose the Paste in place instead of just the regular paste, it allows you to make a copy from the original area, making that part a lot easier. And I'm going to make another copy. I'm going to put this over to the side for a second. I'm going to show everyone a little special trick that you might need or potentially find useful for this next step. Once you actually have your shape, like what we have over here, you can use another option called the Area Type tool. Might be in a little bit of different place, but the general idea is going to be the same. The Area Type tool basically allows a person to select the path, and that part's important. You select anywhere else, you're going to get a little pop-up like that. Not a big deal, just means you didn't select the actual stroke or path. Once you click that proper path, bam, your text will suddenly fit into your shape of choice. Also note that some of the tools I showed previously will also be a huge help with this. So for example, you could change the alignment like so. You could change this to justify all lines to basically take up as much space as possible. You could shrink the text, you could make it bigger. If you need to fill up a little bit more, then this is some good tips that can help. And of course, insert, fill with placeholder text, bam, and yeah, that's looking kind of nice. And of course, if not everything's changing, hit Command or Control A, and then make the changes here. That's looking pretty good, I think. Okay. So again, this is what happens vertically. Oh, one important safety tip. Once you actually do this, whatever color you have in here is gone. And unless you have undo ready, that's not going to be coming back. But I can show you a little trick that could help a little bit. So the next area over here, if we go to our little text area, vertical type tool, you could basically just give any area a bit of a click, and it makes your text like this. Also, something to note when you're doing this is if you choose the white arrow and decide to move things around a little bit, your text actually will move with it. Just bear in mind, it might not bring everything with it. In this case, sorry about that. But it is something that can be helpful for you. But once again, once you use this, your color is going to be going bye-bye. So please keep that in mind. Now that being said, there is a way that if you wanted to have this shape, but still keep the color inside, you could do that. I'm going to show you how you could do that right now. If a person was to select their shape, and I'm going to just change the background color right now, and also add a little bit of a stroke, so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, there we go. I could, should I wish to, use that little copy technique I used. So again, edit, copy, or Command or Control C, edit, and choose paste in place. That part's important. But if you do it this way, the nice thing about this is if I use the area type tool now and give this area a quick little click, you can now keep the text, but also, I'm just going to get rid of all this. You can keep the text, but and the colors at the same time. So just going to make this a little bit bigger for now. Yeah, so it's a little hard to see. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, as long as you make a copy and then paste in place, whatever you select with that little text tool that we have over here, we'll be able to have a colored background like so. You might find this could be a really useful little option in a future assignment. So just going to click over here, turn off my visibility, and I'm going to get into the final step when it comes to all the text over here, and that is going to be type on a path tool and also vertical type on a path tool. Both these can be useful depending on what you're going to be using for them, and if you need something a little bit more complicated, and so on. Now, for this, I am actually going to make myself a little bit of a line. And to make this easier on myself, again, I'm going to hit the black arrow over here. I'm going to get rid of my fill, but I'm going to keep a black stroke so it's easy to identify. You don't keep that stroke, good luck finding that. Sorry, you don't keep the stroke color here, good luck finding this again. It's not that difficult, but it can just be annoying. And I'm going to make a copy of this, Command C, Command V, because there is a difference between the two shapes that we have. So let's take a look at them. So when you're going to be using the type on a path tool, make sure that you get to the farthest area the best that you can. So if you started on this side, this is where your thing would be. And if you start on this side, this is where it would be, and so on. But in this case, selecting over here. Of course, it helps if you select what you're doing. Yeah, there we go. And again, as promised, it basically follows the path, putting the bottom of the text on this way perfectly. Now, something to kind of keep in mind with this is Once again, type on a path tool. If you don't go to the very end, say that we go about 2/3 from the left to right, and you give this area a click, it's only going to start where you clicked on, or at least a little bit afterwards. So please keep that in mind. Close enough in this case will not be close enough. But if you get to the end, like so, you'll find that you're going to be in a much better spot. So that's basically what the Type on a Path tool does. Now the other option here is vertical Type on a Path tool. And what we could do for this is if we click the end, you're going to see that it works very similarly. But the big difference is, unlike the counterpart that we have over here, this text is directly in the center and stays in the center the entire time. So instead of being on top of it, it's going to be right in the center like so. And you might find that this could actually be pretty useful. However, if the text is a little disorienting, there is one option you can choose. If you go back to the character, like what we have over here, there's actually an option that allows you to move your text and rotate your text. Well, this one technically is horizontal scale, and this is the vertical scale. But I think the character rotation could actually be kind of interesting. Let's see if we can get some. Yeah, there we go. So I basically just rotated this 90 degrees to have it look like this. Although if you're going to be doing something in this fashion, you might just be better off just going with this type of text over here. But I'll leave that to your discretion. So that is all the text, at least in this particular section. What I'd recommend you do is take a look at all of the different ones that I've shown and just take a moment to actually get some practice. Get familiar with these. With the type tool, you don't need any extra shapes or lines. With the area type tool, you have to have it closed off. And remember, once you use this, you're going to lose that stroke and you're going to lose the fill. So please plan accordingly. And the on a path tool, whether it's vertical or type, is going to be in a fashion like this. Also note, just so that we can basically take a look at this, that also works going around in a circle like this too. I'm sure that some people probably could find a use for this. But that's pretty much all the elements for that part of the text. So let's get into some new topic right now. Again, I'll just give everyone like a moment or two to actually do something on their own, and then we'll move on to the next thing in about 10 seconds. So this would be the part where you probably pause the tape, or video in this case. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. So I am going to make a new layer, hide the old, and I'm going to make some bigger text, because what I'm going to be doing this time is I'm going to actually make bigger text. Oops, let's see, I think that some of my old options might be on. Yeah, when you're done, always make sure that you change it back to the way it was. What happened here is I accidentally left my rotate tool on, put it at 90%. I put this back at 0. Seems to be working better now. So I think we're good. All right. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to erase a lot of this text because I don't need it. And I'm just going to put this as big as I can. Just fill with, you know, I'm just going to get rid of this entirely. So boink, boink. There we are. And I'm just going to put my name. Let's see, Professor. Okay. So I can probably bring this out just a smidge more, so I can use more of that space, and I can basically shrink this down a little bit to make the little lattice we have over here a little bit tighter. This is definitely a good thing to have. Now what you would do next is we're going to be using something called warps to basically skew and change how the text is going to look. So if you don't need to get quite as fancy as what we were seeing before, this is definitely a way that you can work with this. So let's take a look. So I can use the make envelope to basically make an arc like what we're seeing over here. And you could use elements like the bend. Oh, let's see. It should be previewing. Yeah, there we go. Not sure why it wasn't doing that before. And you could use the horizontal and vertical to skew this even more than necessary. Yeah, I'm kind of digging that. And also similar to this, if you go to the arcs, you'll see some other options for here. So you can use options like fisheye to skew it in a more of a, well, center-like look like this. That just looks weird, but that's okay. There's even an option for fish and even bulge. But in this case, I'm going to just keep it at arc because I really like how this text looks. So I'll give everyone a moment to just kind of play around with a couple of these settings yourself. Taking a moment to recognize yourself with the tools will make it easier for the whole creation process. So just taking another 5 seconds, so you can pause the video or whatever you need to do. 5, 4. Okay, so once I hit OK, that stays permanently, unless I undo this. If you need to make adjustments or changes, or if, like, for example, I want to maybe skew this a little bit more, you can use the actual direct selection tool and actually focus on the anchors here. And this will allow you to make some adjustments like so. I wouldn't recommend getting too fancy with this, but it is nice to know you have the option for it. Now, besides this, I can go to my text. I'm going to make this Lorem Ipsum. And the other way that you can adjust your text, if you need a little bit more of a fancy touch to it, or more of a manual touch, I should probably say, if you go to the same area, this is basically, again, where we had the Make Envelope Space Warps. If you hit the little drop down over here, you should see an option, Make with Mesh. And I'm going to leave the preview on here. And this will basically make you your own control points that you have total manual override for. Now, something I would recommend is for the long areas, you're going to have a pretty decent amount of control points and such. But for the no, I like the columns. The rows, I'm going to turn that down a little bit. But the higher the numbers, the more of these options we have. But you have to be careful because sometimes having too many options can make the process more tricky. If I kept this the way that it was, it could be a little tricky to actually make some significant changes. But if I change the rows to about 2, I think I got something I could work with. So I'm going to hit OK. Once again, hit the white arrow. And once again, you have total control over what you do with this. And you do have handles that you can adjust as well. And that's looking pretty awesome. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, you can make a completely custom shape yourself should you need to. So once again, the top one over here, that is using the space warp. Let's see. Now, something you'll notice is once you get rid of, once this actually happens and such, it's very difficult to change the text or anything beyond this. So make sure, just as a safety precaution, what you have in terms of your text is exactly what you want. But when you're ready, and you just quick click an area or add in the text you need, hit the black arrow, and then just go to this little area over here. It's to the right of your paragraph. And the Make Warp has some pre-made shapes for you, while the Make with Mesh gives you options to customize this however you choose. But, of course, choose wisely. And, yeah, you just hit OK when you're done, or you can hit Preview. to make sure that you're on the right track. I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm good. Now I'm going to make one last layer. Turn this off. And I'm going to make text like so. Now this last option I would not recommend for anything that's going to be very text heavy. This is something that you would have for a big headline or anything that would be in that vein and such. So once you have your text ready though, you can go to the type tool over here and you can use an option called create outline. Now what this does, unlike the warp that we had previously, where it basically fixed all the text at one time, this actually makes shapes out of every single font here, allowing us, by going to type, create outline, to use the white arrow, and you have all the control points over here like so. A little word of warning though, the rounder the text is, the more points it's going to have on it, for better or for worse. So do definitely keep that in mind, because this can be a little daunting at first. But something that's cool about it is, now that these control points exist, you can make adjustments like that. Likewise, if you select just one of these areas, like before, sometimes they have these extra handles you can adjust and change. So try it yourself. Just take a moment, go down your list, put some text in here. Then, once you're ready, hit the black arrow, make sure what you want to change the text is selected, go to type, and then go to the option create outline. I'll leave this up here for a second for those of you who are taking notes or just need to see it. But once again, once that happens, it's going to take all those fonts and turn them into proper shapes, which you can manipulate and change. Okay, so we're getting to the 30-minute mark, actually a little over the 30-minute mark. So I'm going to stop this particular video, but we'll do the next one very shortly. So hopefully you found this useful, specifically for type and text. And yep, I would save this just by going to File, Save. But in this case, I'm just going to hit record. I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop the recording for now.